It started with a sleepover like any other. Back then, I was 13. Not a kid, but not quite a teenager with independence yet. That weird in-between phase where staying the night at a friend's house still felt like the ultimate freedom. It was late fall, just cold enough that you needed a blanket, but not cold enough to keep the windows shut all the way. I lived in Riverview Heights, a smaller town nestled against the edge of a wide pine forest, and it wasn't the kind of place where strange things happened. At least that's what we thought. That Friday night, my friend Daniel invited me and two other guys, Eli and Sean, for a sleepover at his place. His house was a split level at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, not far from the woods. It was the kind of neighborhood where porch lights always flickered on at 7 p.m., and everyone waved whether they knew you or not. Daniel's mom worked the night shift at the hospital and his older brother was away at college. That meant the house was ours, and that meant chaos. We played Xbox in Daniel's room for hours, throwing chips at each other, blasting Mountain Dew and laughing like idiots at dumb YouTube videos. The room wasn't big, just enough space for his twin bed, a desk, and a mess of sleeping bags we laid out across the carpet. We had all just set up our beds and dimmed the lights when Eli, lying closest to the wall, asked, "Dude, where's my blanket?" Daniel chuckled. "Check under your bag. You probably kicked it." Eli rustled around, then sat up. "No, I swear it was right here." We all checked. No blanket. At first it was funny. Eli was the forgetful one. He once tried to charge his phone with a straw. But we looked under the desk, behind the bed, even checked the hallway. Nothing. Daniel gave him an extra throw blanket from the linen closet, and we moved on. We were halfway through a try not to laugh video when Sean sat up. "Okay, not funny. Where the hell is my blanket?" He wasn't laughing, and neither were we. "You're messing with us, right?" I asked. "No, dude, seriously, it was just here. I was using it." Daniel turned on the overhead light. It felt like someone dropped a cold sheet over the room. We all got quiet. Again, we searched, this time more frantically. I even checked the laundry room and downstairs guest room. Nothing. 2 blankets. Gone. In a locked house. In a locked room. Daniel's golden retriever, Sadie, hadn't even come into the room all night. We assumed she was sleeping with her nose under the couch in the living room like usual. So, who the hell took the blankets? "I don't like this," Eli muttered. "This feels like some paranormal activity stuff." Daniel tried to keep the mood light. "Guys, come on. It's probably a prank. My brother's not that far. He could have come home without saying anything." He called him. Voicemail. We tried to go back to hanging out, but no one was really laughing anymore. Eventually, we decided to head to the kitchen and heat up pizza rolls. We were gone maybe 20 minutes. When we came back, Sean went stiff. Nope, no freaking way. His whole sleeping bag was gone. Not just the blanket, the entire sleeping bag. We stood there frozen, all of us staring at the empty spot on the floor like it was a crime scene. It didn't make any sense. We were all upstairs, all of us. No one heard footsteps. No one saw anything. Then I noticed something. A torn bit of fabric, gray fleece, peeking from under Daniel's bed. "Hey," I said. "There's something under there." I crouched down and reached for it. The moment my fingers brushed it, I heard a rustling noise, like someone shifting fast on plastic. My heart stopped. My body went cold. I leaned further, expecting to see maybe the blanket balled up under the frame. But there were eyes. Eyes looking back at me from the dark. I screamed. So did the others. We bolted from the room, shoving each other in pure, stupid panic. Daniel slammed the bedroom door shut and locked it, all of us gasping and shaking in the hallway. "What the hell was that?" Sean shouted. "Who the hell was that?" "I thought that was your dog," Eli yelled. Daniel, pale as a ghost, shook his head. "Sadie's on the couch. She hasn't moved all night." "I saw eyes," I said, trembling. "Human eyes. Not animal. Human. We didn't go back into that room." We dragged our sleeping bags downstairs and slept in the living room, lights on. Sadie curled up next to us for the first time all night, but something about the way she kept looking toward the hallway made it worse. We didn't really sleep. Not really. At around 3 a.m., Sadie stood up and started growling, low, guttural. Her hackles raised. She was staring toward the dark hallway that led back to the bedrooms. Then she barked, loud and sharp. Something creaked. Floorboards, maybe. I remember Daniel whispering, "Someone's in the house." We grabbed whatever we could find, broomsticks, a fireplace poker, even a Nerf bat, and we just sat there, armed and terrified, waiting for daylight. When Daniel's mom came home around 7 a.m. and we told her everything, she didn't laugh, didn't say we were imagining things. She believed us, instantly. Then she saw the muddy footprints. They started at the hallway window just barely cracked open and led toward Daniel's room. She called the police. They searched the house, top to bottom. Nothing. They said it was probably an animal, maybe a prank. Maybe one of us sleepwalked and dragged the blankets around without realizing it. We knew that was BS. A week later, Daniel called me. He sounded off. "They found someone," he said, "in the attic." My chest tightened. The guy had been living up there for a while, months maybe. They think he came in through the crawl space under the deck and just stayed. At night, he'd come down, steal food, blankets, whatever. The cops found wrappers, empty water bottles, some of our old clothes, even stuff from our backpacks. I was speechless. "He had a knife," Daniel added. "A hunting knife. They found it up there." Turns out the guy was a frogger. That's what they call people who secretly live inside someone else's home, hide in crawl spaces, attics, basements, move around when you're asleep or gone. They watch, wait, and sometimes, worse. The police said we were lucky, that he never hurt us. But we all remembered that night, that stare, that moment under the bed. And the worst part, he'd probably been there while we were laughing, while we joked and played video games, while we walked around barefoot and slept on the floor. He was probably under the bed the whole time, watching. We never stayed at Daniel's again. He moved the next summer. His mom couldn't take it, couldn't live there knowing what had happened. The attic entrance was just a panel in the hallway ceiling. You could lift it with one hand. And when I think about that night, I don't remember the jokes, or the pizza rolls, or the games. I remember the sound of breathing, right behind the wall, and the eyes in the dark. I never used to be the paranoid one. That was always Trevor, or maybe Brandon when he got into those late-night YouTube rabbit holes about break-ins or cartel kidnappings. Me? I was the one who told everyone to calm down, that the world wasn't that crazy, that most people weren't monsters, that things like that didn't just happen. That was before last summer, before the night we all stopped being kids. It started like any other sleepover we used to have. A tradition, really. Since middle school, every summer we'd crash at one of our houses, stay up all night with junk food, horror movies, and stupid games like Would You Rather, or Would You Fight a Bear for $1 million? This time, it was at Caleb's place, a big one-story house on the edge of town in a neighborhood called Brookside Pines. It sounded fancier than it was, mostly quiet families, a few retirees, the kind of place where kids ride bikes at dusk and everyone waves even if they don't know your name. Caleb's parents were the kind who bought Costco-sized snacks and left us alone as long as we didn't destroy the place. His dad was a pilot, usually gone for work, and his mom worked nights as a nurse. That Friday, she left at around 6:30 p.m., reminding us not to stay up too late with a wink because she knew we would anyway. There were 5 of us that night. Me, Isaac, Caleb, obviously, Trevor, Brandon, and Eric. We were all 17, seniors now, and there was this unspoken sense that it might be one of the last real sleepovers before college or jobs or whatever else adulthood had waiting. It felt normal, comfortable, familiar, until it wasn't. We started the night off lazy. Pizza, Mountain Dew, a few rounds of Mortal Kombat, and then The Conjuring on Caleb's giant-ass TV. Around 10, someone suggested flashlight tag outside, but we vetoed it. Too humid. Bugs. Besides, it was one of those nights where even the air felt still. No breeze, just heat pressing against the windows like it wanted in. Around 11:15, the doorbell rang. Caleb looked confused. "You guys expecting anyone?" We weren't. He checked the peephole, then cracked the door. "Oh, it's just Mason, my cousin." None of us really knew Mason. I'd seen him once, maybe twice over the years. He was a couple years older than us, 20 maybe. Always had this half-sleepy, half-smirking expression that made it impossible to tell whether he was bored or judging you. "Yo," Mason said casually, sliding into the living room like he owned the place. "Heard y'all had pizza." Caleb laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, we saved a few slices." Mason didn't ask. He just grabbed a paper plate and started stacking slices while we awkwardly paused the movie. He wasn't rude exactly, but it was clear he wasn't there to hang out with us either. Brandon whispered to me, "This guy gives me weird vibes." I shrugged. "He's just older. Probably high or something." Mason didn't stay long, maybe 40 minutes. Ate half the leftovers, messed around on his phone, said something about meeting up with people later, and bounced. Caleb didn't seem fazed. Said Mason sometimes crashed there when things were rough at home. His parents were out of town and he had a key. It was weird, sure, but not red flag weird. Yet. We finally settled down around midnight. Caleb pulled out sleeping bags and couch cushions, and we laid them out all over the living room. It was dim, the glow of the kitchen light left on in the background just so we weren't in total darkness. Everyone was half asleep, tossing out dumb jokes, trying to make someone snort laugh before we drifted off. Sometime around 1:20 a.m. I stirred. Not from a nightmare. From a sound. A soft click thump. Like the sliding glass door in the kitchen being opened. I blinked in the darkness, heart thudding. At first I told myself it was Caleb getting a snack. But then I rolled over and saw him curled up in his sleeping bag next to the couch, still as a rock, deep asleep. That's when I heard voices. Low, muffled, 2 of them. Then the lights snapped on, and time stopped. There were 2 men, both in black ski masks. One of them had a gun, the kind that looked cold and real and heavy, not like the prop ones in movies. He pointed it at us and shouted, "Get up, don't move, hands where I can see them." I froze. My body responded before my brain did, arms jerking up, heart exploding inside my chest. I remember Caleb sitting up groggy and confused, Brandon gasping, Eric whispering, "Oh my God," over and over. The second guy carried a duffel bag. He started barking orders. Phones, wallets, watches, everything in the middle. Now. We obeyed. Not because we were brave, but because that gun was aimed at us, and the guy holding it looked like he'd pulled a trigger before. Trevor dropped his phone too fast and it clattered across the hardwood. The masked man swore and aimed the gun at him. "You think this is funny? Do it again and I swear—" No, I'm sorry," Trevor stammered. He was shaking. We all were. The second guy rifled through Eric's backpack, dumping everything out. He even pocketed a half-used cologne bottle. It was chaotic, violent in a quiet, controlled way, like they'd done this before. Then something happened that made my blood run colder than anything else. The guy with the gun turned slightly, just a glance, and Caleb looked back, not panicked, not scared, calm. They made eye contact, for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I didn't say anything at first. I told myself I imagined it. But then I noticed something else. They weren't even touching Caleb's stuff. His phone was still on the arm of the couch, his wallet half out of his backpack untouched. Even his fancy Jordans by the door, they didn't go near them. I didn't know what to think, until the guy with the duffel suddenly fired a shot into the ceiling. The blast was deafening. A cloud of plaster rained down. Trevor screamed. Brandon curled into a ball. Eric sat paralyzed. And Caleb? Caleb flinched a second too late, like he knew it was coming. "Shut up," the masked man bellowed. "Next one won't miss." They finished grabbing our stuff, phones, chargers, a Nintendo Switch, even some Bluetooth speakers, then bolted out the door and disappeared into the night. For a long time, we just sat there, breathing, listening, waiting for another shot. But it never came. We didn't call the cops, not right away. We called our parents. They showed up furious and terrified, demanding answers. Caleb tried to act shocked, said he had no idea who they were, that they must have broken in, that we were lucky to be alive, but we weren't buying it. Not after what we saw, not after what we started piecing together. "Your cousin was here earlier," Brandon said slowly. Then suddenly masked guys show up? That's a hell of a coincidence. Caleb denied everything. "Screw you, man. You think I'd set us up?" But he was sweating, not scared sweating, guilty sweating. Trevor pointed at the untouched Jordans. "Why didn't they take those? They're worth more than my whole backpack." Eric said nothing, just stared at Caleb like he'd never seen him before. And I finally asked the question no one else dared to. "Did you know?" Caleb didn't answer. That silence was louder than any gunshot. Later that week, we found out Mason had a record. Petty theft, breaking and entering. He'd been arrested before, a few times. Police were never involved with what happened to us. Our parents didn't want us dragged into legal drama. They made excuses, said the guys must have just got lucky, that maybe Mason wasn't involved, but we knew better. We never heard from Caleb again. He switched schools 2 months later, moved in with some relatives across the state. Sometimes I still wake up at 1:20 a.m., still hear the door sliding open, still feel that gun pointed at my chest. But what haunts me more than the fear is the betrayal. It wasn't just a robbery, it was a choice. By someone we trusted, someone we laughed with, played video games with, grew up with. The worst kind of monster isn't the one who breaks into your home, it's the one who lets them in and watches you suffer. It started with a sleepover. Nothing strange, just 4 girls, an old house, and a borrowed camera. But things like this don't stay simple. Not when something's watching from the shadows, not when it's already in the frame before anyone realizes they never opened the door. I was 13 when it happened, the kind of 13 where you still call your parents mommy when you're scared, but you're trying really hard not to. My best friend at the time, Callie Rhodes, invited me and 2 other girls, Harper and June, for a sleepover at her place one Friday night. It was one of those big old houses on the edge of a tiny town called Ashmill, the kind that creaks like it's stretching in its sleep. Her family had moved there the year before from somewhere upstate, and we all thought it was cool she had a whole attic just for herself. No one else we knew had that. The attic was weird, yeah, but not in a bad way. It had slanted ceilings and old wood floors that groaned when you walked, and one of those tiny circular windows at the far end. It was always a little cold up there, no matter the season. But Callie had covered the floor in sleeping bags and pillows, strung up fairy lights, and brought up an old box TV and DVD player to make it feel more like a teen hangout than a dusty storage space. We'd been there before, played truth or dare, whispered about crushes, prank-called boys we didn't even like. But this night felt different. And I still don't know if that's because of what happened, or if something in me already knew something was wrong from the moment I stepped through their front door. Callie's mom made us pizza from scratch, and her dad had gone out of town for work, so we had the place mostly to ourselves. She had an older brother, Ryan, but he was at his friend's house. Just us girls, the attic, and a few hours to kill. Callie was always finding weird stuff in that house. A few weeks earlier, she'd said she found a stash of old letters in the crawl space and one of those music boxes with the spinning ballerina, except the ballerina had no head. That kind of house. But that night, she told us she found her dad's old camera. A bulky silver Sony Cybershot, the kind from the early 2000s, with that tiny digital screen on the back and a big flash that made everything look washed out. Found it in a box under the attic stairs, she said, tossing it into the pile of blankets between us. Still works. Want to mess around with it? Of course we did. We were 13 and bored and high on orange soda and Pop Rocks. We took photos of each other making stupid faces, pretending to be supermodels, vampires, witches, whatever we could think of. The flash was ridiculous. Overexposed everything so badly it looked like we were glowing ghosts. That just made it more fun. Callie dared me to go down into the basement alone and take a picture with the lights off. I chickened out after 3 steps. Harper and June came with me instead, and we snapped a few blurry photos by the old washing machine, then ran screaming when we heard a thump from upstairs. We assumed it was the pipes or the cat. Callie's family had this old gray cat named Buttons who moved like smoke. We laughed it off, ran back upstairs, and sprawled out in the attic again. Later, around midnight, we were all huddled in sleeping bags when Callie started flipping through the photos on the camera. We crowded around her to laugh at our dumb poses, pointing and teasing each other like always, until she stopped. She didn't say anything at first, just frowned, tapped back one photo, then forward again. "Wait," she said. "Who's that?" "What do you mean?" June leaned over her shoulder. "That's us in the living room." "Yeah, but look." Callie tilted the camera toward us. It was a picture of me, Harper, and June pretending to levitate in front of the couch, arms raised, our mouths open like we were casting spells. But behind us, just past the hallway entrance, there was a figure. Tall, male, pale face, dark clothes, just standing there. "I don't remember anyone being behind us," Harper said slowly. "We were alone, right?" I felt my mouth go dry. "Maybe it's Ryan? Maybe he came home early." "No," Callie whispered. "He texted me an hour ago. He's staying over." She tapped the button again. In the next photo, the man was closer. Standing in the kitchen doorway now, just barely behind Harper's shoulder. His face was still expressionless, just blank. But his eyes were fixed right on the camera. June gasped and yanked her sleeping bag up to her chin. "This is some prank, right? Like, you edited these or something?" "It's a digital camera," I said. "You can't just Photoshop stuff like that. Not on the camera." Callie's hand started shaking as she scrolled again. Another picture. Me and June on the floor pretending to wrestle. Harper throwing a pillow at us. And him. He was just a few feet behind me. His hand was reaching out. His fingers maybe an inch from my shoulder. I felt bile rise in my throat. "He was that close?" I whispered. "How did we not see him?" "We would have heard him," Callie said, voice trembling. "He was right behind you." The panic didn't hit all at once. It was like the room slowly got heavier. Our brains were trying to make it not real. But there was nothing fuzzy about those pictures. He was there. He had been there. "I'm getting Mom," June said, bolting up. "No." Callie grabbed her arm. "They're gonna say it's fake or something. Let's check the house. Right now." That's when I knew she was scared. Callie never wanted to check things herself. She always sent her brother to the basement when we watched scary movies, but she grabbed a broom and started leading the way down the stairs. We turned on every single light in the house, looked under beds, behind shower curtains, even in the garage. The back door was locked. All the windows were locked. "No way he just got in and out without us noticing," Harper whispered. "No way." Eventually, we woke Callie's mom. She looked alarmed when she saw our faces, and even more so when we showed her the photos. She didn't say much. Her eyes just darted across the screen, her lips pressed thin. Callie's dad got home early the next morning and took the camera to check the settings, but we all saw it in his face. He didn't believe it was just a lens flare or glitch, not really. But the worst part came after. When Callie went to show her parents the photos again, they were gone. All of them. Every picture we took that night, erased. The older ones on the memory card were still there. But all the ones with him? Deleted. "No one touched it," Callie swore. "I didn't delete anything. I swear," her mom tried to reassure us. Sometimes the old memory cards corrupt. Pictures disappear all the time. But it didn't feel like corruption. It felt like something didn't want us remembering. We begged Callie's dad to take the camera to someone, anyone, to recover the files. But he said the card was too old, too unreliable. That was the end of it. Or at least it was supposed to be. None of us ever went back to that house. Callie started hanging out with different girls at school. Harper moved away the following summer. June stopped replying to texts after a few months. We never talked about it again, but even now, 30 years later, I still remember his face. Not angry, not sad, just there. Like he belonged in that house more than we did. Like we had wandered into his space, not the other way around. I've told this story maybe 3 times in my life. No one ever believes it. They say it was a dream, or we faked the photos, or it was someone's dad messing with us. But I remember how it felt when I looked at that last picture. How close he was. How I could almost feel his breath on my neck, though I hadn't felt anything at the time. You don't forget something like that. You can't. I didn't even want to go to the sleepover in the first place. It was one of those invitations you say yes to because everyone else already has, and you don't want to be the only one left out. The group had been talking about it for a week. Friday night at Miles's house, movies and junk food, no parents. I didn't even know Miles that well. He went to the same school, was in a couple of my classes. Always quiet and kind of odd. Not in a bad way, just off. The kind of kid who wore a hoodie even in summer and wrote in a black notebook during lunch while everyone else traded chips and talked about soccer. But my friends were going. Jenna, Aiden, Rosie, Liam, and Chris, so I said yes. What I didn't realize was that this was going to be his first sleepover ever. Miles lived way out on the edge of Larkspur Lane, in one of those older 2-story houses that still had wooden steps and a wraparound porch. It was the kind of place that looked like it used to be beautiful but hadn't been loved in a while. Paint peeling around the windows, yellow porch light flickering, grass half dead in the front yard. His parents weren't going to be home. They were in Vermont for the weekend, some kind of work retreat, and had left him alone with money for pizza and a list of emergency numbers. Looking back, that was probably the first red flag. Who leaves a 15-year-old alone for an entire weekend with 6 other kids? But we all showed up anyway. Miles answered the door in a black hoodie, of course. He gave each of us a slow nod, barely said a word, and led us inside. His living room was dim, with only a couple of table lamps for light. The curtains were drawn tight. A stack of horror DVDs sat next to a dusty-looking TV, along with a big bowl of popcorn and some off-brand sodas. "Cool setup," Aiden said, dropping his bag. "Thanks," Miles mumbled, standing stiffly by the window like he wasn't sure what to do next. We all kind of settled in. Jenna pulled a blanket over her lap, Rosie sprawled across the floor, and Chris kept making loud jokes to fill the weird silence. I sat on the end of the couch and just watched for a bit. Miles never really relaxed. He kept glancing at the front door, then at the hallway behind him, like he was waiting for something. The first movie was one of those campy 80s slashers. Blood, screaming, dumb teenagers getting lost in the woods. It helped break the tension. We laughed at the bad acting and threw popcorn when someone jumped. For a while, it actually felt like a real sleepover. That changed during the second movie. It was a slower one. Some black and white foreign film about a haunted house. Miles didn't sit with us. He stood behind the couch, watching not the movie, but us. At first I thought I was imagining it. But then I saw Rosie shift uncomfortably, and Chris glance back over his shoulder. "You good, man?" Aiden asked. Miles blinked slowly. "This one's based on a true story," he said. No one responded. He kept going, his voice quiet but even. "You know, most people think ghosts make noise, but they don't. They just watch. They watch you until you stop noticing." "All right," Jenna muttered. "Thanks for that." "Just saying," Miles shrugged. We tried to ignore it and finish the movie, but the vibe had definitely shifted. The room felt colder. No one was really talking. Rosie whispered something to Jenna, who just shook her head and glanced at the clock. It was only 10:45. After the second movie, Miles offered to give us a tour of the house. None of us were dying to see more of it, but Liam, being Liam, said, "Sure, why not?" And that got everyone moving. We followed Miles upstairs to his room, which smelled faintly of dust and something like cloves. It was strange. The walls were lined with shelves, books, candles, and these weird little figures made of cloth and twine. They looked handmade. Some had button eyes, others had none at all. A few were missing arms or legs. "Did you make these?" Jenna asked, forcing a small laugh. Miles nodded. "Yeah. I used to make them when I couldn't sleep." "What are they supposed to be?" "People," he said. "Kind of." I tried not to look at them too long. One of them had red yarn stitched across its mouth, and I could have sworn it was facing one direction when we walked in, but now it was turned slightly more toward the door. He opened his closet. Inside was a tall figure, nearly life-sized, slumped in an old wooden chair. It wore a long black robe, and its face was covered with a burlap sack. A patch had been sewn where a mouth should have been. The hair wasn't yarn. It was real, brown, stringy, and dirty. "This is the Watcher," Miles said, smiling for the first time all night. "He sees everything," Rosie whispered. "Okay, I want to go back downstairs now." But Miles kept talking. "You shouldn't look into his eyes too long. He doesn't like it." "Doesn't even have eyes," Liam muttered. "He does. Under the sack." Back in the living room, nobody said much. We sat in silence, the third movie playing while everyone stared at the TV but wasn't really watching. I kept glancing at the staircase, half expecting to see that doll thing standing there. At some point, everyone began drifting off. Aiden and Chris were out cold, curled up in sleeping bags. Jenna and Rosie whispered quietly before settling down. I tried to close my eyes, but I couldn't stop thinking about the Watcher. It felt like something was still awake. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The TV had gone to a blank blue screen. The room was silent. Something felt wrong. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. The living room was dark, but the hallway light was on. There was a shape at the edge of it. At first I thought it was Miles, but it wasn't. It was taller, thinner, and it was wearing the same robe the Watcher doll had been wearing, the same burlap sack over its head. I froze. The thing didn't move. It just stood there, its head tilted slightly to one side. I reached out slowly, nudging Aiden. He stirred but didn't wake up. When I looked back, the hallway was empty. I told myself I was dreaming. I had to be. I laid back down, heart racing, and pulled the blanket up to my chin. But then I heard the creak. Floorboards upstairs. Then another, and another. Like footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving above us. I wasn't the only one who heard. Rosie sat up, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Jenna was already awake, clutching her blanket. Miles never came back downstairs. The footsteps stopped. Then we heard something slide across the floor, like a chair being dragged. Jenna wanted to leave. She whispered that she was going to grab her bag and call her dad. Chris told her she was overreacting. But then the lights went out. All of them. The hallway, the lamps, even the blue glow of the TV vanished. Total darkness. Everyone screamed. We fumbled for our phones. Mine was dead. So was Rosie's. Aiden's wouldn't turn on. Jenna's flickered and shut off. We heard movement from the stairs, fast, like something running. Then it was in the room. I swear to God I felt it. A heavy presence, cold air, breathing, low and ragged. Someone screamed. Someone ran into the wall. I ducked, covering my head. And then, nothing. Silence. When the lights flickered back on, Miles was standing in the hallway, in normal clothes, holding a box of cereal. "What happened?" he asked, blinking like he'd just woken up. "Why are you all freaking out?" Nobody answered. Rosie burst into tears. Chris told him to shut up. Aiden stood there shaking. We left. All of us. Jenna texted her dad from the street and we waited by the mailbox. Nobody said a word the entire ride home. I never went back to Larkspur Lane. None of us did. Miles stopped coming to school 2 weeks later. Word was he'd transferred. No one really knew where. Sometimes, late at night, I still see that hallway in my dreams. The tall figure, the burlap sack, the way it tilted its head like it was listening to my thoughts. The worst part, it wasn't a doll. It had moved, and it knew I was watching. It started the summer before 7th grade, back when I used to spend nearly every night with my best friend Mia Thompson. We were neighbors on Oak Ridge Drive, a quiet middle-class street in a town called Fairhaven, Michigan. The kind of neighborhood where people still waved when they passed each other and kids rode bikes until the porch lights came on. Mia and I were inseparable. Our parents joked we must have been twins in a past life. If I wasn't at her house, she was at mine, and during the summer we practically lived at each other's places. Her house was older than mine, a little 2-story blue colonial with white shutters, worn wooden floors, and a creaky staircase that made it impossible to sneak around undetected. Her bedroom was upstairs at the front, with 2 wide windows that overlooked the street. The kind of room that felt alive with character but creaked and whispered when the house settled. Her parents, Eric and Dana, were always kind to me and let me stay over whenever I wanted. It was like my second home. That Friday night in July started just like any other. I had walked over just after lunch carrying my sleeping bag under one arm and a plastic grocery bag filled with snacks and an extra hoodie. The air was heavy with humidity, and the faint scent of someone grilling hamburgers drifted through the neighborhood. Mia met me at the door, grinning like she'd been waiting all morning. "Finally," she said. "I was about to walk down and drag you here." Inside, the house was cool from the window units humming in the background. We spent the day doing the usual, watching dumb YouTube videos, scrolling TikTok, painting our nails, and gossiping about our classmates. Dinner was spaghetti and garlic bread, and afterwards her mom brought out brownies still warm from the oven. By the time we went upstairs to her room, the sky had faded from pink to dark purple. The streetlights flicked on one by one, bathing the street in a yellowish glow. We stayed up watching a horror movie on her iPad under a blanket fort we made using chairs and string lights, pausing every few minutes to shriek at the jump scares and then laugh at how scared we were. I remember checking the time when the movie ended, 12:04 a.m. And that's when everything shifted. "Hey, look," Mia said suddenly, pulling the blanket off her head and crawling to the window. I followed, still laughing from the ending of the movie, but when I saw her face, tight-lipped, eyes narrowed, I stopped. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer, just pointed. Down below, under the flickering orange streetlight, a man was walking slowly up the sidewalk. At first, I didn't think anything of it. People walked their dogs sometimes, even late. But this man didn't have a dog. He didn't seem to be walking anywhere either. He would stroll a few feet past one house, stop, turn around, walk back the other way, then repeat the same thing again and again, back and forth, like he was waiting for something, or someone. "Do you know him?" I whispered. Mia shook her head. "Never seen him before." He wasn't dressed like someone out for a jog or a walk. He wore a heavy dark hoodie with the hood up, even though it was at least 75 degrees outside. He had baggy pants and boots, and he kept his hands tucked in his front pocket. We watched in silence, pressed against the glass, our breath fogging the window. After a few minutes, he stopped pacing and just stood there, looking around. Then, almost like he felt our gaze, he looked up, right at us. We both ducked. Our hearts were pounding. I could hear Mia whispering, "What the hell, what the hell, what the hell?" I wanted to believe he hadn't seen us. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was looking at the house. But somehow we both knew that wasn't true. We sat on the floor of her room for a while, not speaking, listening carefully for any sound. After a few minutes, we laughed nervously, trying to shake off the fear. "He probably didn't see us," I said, trying to convince both of us. "Yeah," Mia said. "Maybe he's just waiting for an Uber or something." But deep down, I didn't believe that. Then we heard the knock. 3 slow knocks, deliberate, on the front door. We froze. Mia's house didn't have a doorbell. You either knocked or didn't come in. We sat there in silence, hoping we'd imagined it. Another knock, this time louder. Her parents were asleep down the hall, and we didn't want to wake them unless we were sure. So stupidly, we decided to sneak downstairs and look through the small window next to the front door. We didn't turn on any lights. The stairs creaked under our feet, and every sound made my stomach flip. At the bottom, we crouched next to the door and peeked through the window. It was him, the same man from the street. He was standing too close to the door, his face hidden by the hood, but I could see his posture. Tense, hunched. He turned slightly, like he sensed us, and then slowly. He looked straight at us through the glass. His face was pale, gaunt, his eyes wide and sunken. I'll never forget the look in them, like he wasn't seeing us, like he was looking through us. We ducked again. "What the hell is happening?" Mia whispered, her voice shaking. And then came the pounding. He slammed both fists against the glass, over and over. The whole door rattled in its frame. We screamed and ran upstairs. Mia's dad was the first to wake up. We burst into their room, shouting that someone was trying to break in. By the time he rushed downstairs, the man was gone. The police came 20 minutes later. They searched the yard, checked the porch, and drove around the neighborhood. But there was no sign of the man, no footprints, no car nearby, nothing. One of the officers told us it was probably someone drunk or high, a random wanderer. But that didn't feel right. Why did he look up at us? Twice? Why did he knock instead of breaking in? Why did he stare the way he did, like he knew us? I called my parents and they came to pick me up. I didn't sleep that night. Mia didn't either. We kept texting until the sun came up. Mia and I still talk about that night even now. We're both 23. I live in a different state, and she moved out of that house 2 years ago. A few months ago, she told me something I can't shake. She was going through old family photos and found one taken at her 7th birthday party. There were balloons, cake, her cousins and friends, including me, wearing a sparkly shirt and blue shorts. And in the background, standing near the fence, was a man, wearing a hoodie, looking straight at the camera. Mia swears no one remembers inviting him. Her parents don't know who he is. She showed me the picture on FaceTime. My blood ran cold. It was the same man. He was there, years before we ever saw him pacing the street. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if we'd opened that door, or if Mia's parents hadn't been home. And I wonder if he's still out there, waiting, watching. I still remember the way the air felt that night. Warm, still and heavy, with the kind of quiet you only notice when you're young and waiting for something exciting to happen. Back when I was 10, summer meant long days, sticky popsicles and sleepovers that stretched until the first birds started chirping. I used to stay over at my cousin Liam's house almost every weekend. His place was different, bigger, older, and a little creaky in a way that made every game of hide and seek feel like an adventure. Unlike mine, his house had real hiding places, crawl spaces, attic stairs, old closets, and a basement with 3 different storage rooms. It felt like a castle compared to my 2-bedroom apartment. Back then, we didn't have iPads or TikTok or even our own phones. If we wanted to have fun, we had to invent it. And our favorite invention was flashlight hide and seek. The rules were simple. No lights allowed, just 1 flashlight per person, and the hider always had a 5-minute head start. We thought we were brave. We thought we were clever. But we were still just kids playing pretend in a house that knew how to hold secrets. Liam's parents were always cool. His mom, Aunt Rachel, worked nights at the hospital, and his dad was a traveling surveyor who sometimes spent 2 or 3 days on the road. That night, both had gone to a friend's anniversary party 2 towns over in Ocean View. They were planning to stay overnight at a nearby hotel. Liam's older brother, Dean, 17 and rebellious in that bored teenage way, was supposed to stay and watch us. But right around 9 p.m., just as we were finishing our grilled cheese sandwiches, Dean leaned against the fridge and told us, "Hey, I'm heading out for a bit. Don't be stupid. Don't burn the place down. And if anyone asks, I'm upstairs asleep. Cool?" Liam didn't even look up from his food. Yeah, whatever. Dean didn't wait for us to agree. A minute later, we heard the back door shut. This wasn't the first time he'd done it. Liam liked having the house to ourselves. More room, no rules. Dean liked getting out. It was the perfect arrangement for both of them. And I, being the visiting cousin, didn't get a say. We started our game the usual way. Rock, paper, scissors. I lost, so I was the first to hide. 5 minutes. Liam grinned, holding his cheap blue flashlight like it was a weapon. And no attic this time. You cheat. That was once, I shot back, already tiptoeing toward the basement door. And you never even found me. He counted in the darkened basement while I crept upstairs. Not just the main floor, but all the way up to the 2nd level. Liam's house had this weird layout, like it had been built in sections over the decades. The 2nd floor had an extra living room, 2 spare bedrooms, and a long hallway that always smelled faintly of mothballs and dust. I ducked into the smaller spare room at the end. There were 2 huge beanbag chairs under a dusty window, and an old quilt folded on a box near the wall. Perfect. I wedged myself between the beanbags and pulled the blanket over my body, leaving a little breathing room near my nose. The door to the room was open slightly. I figured it would make Liam less suspicious. All I had to do was stay still and wait. Something feels off. A few minutes passed. I heard creaking on the stairs. Footsteps. Liam, I thought. They were slow but confident, like someone who wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. The carpet muffled most of it, but I could still track the movement. Into the hallway, then the spare bedroom door. The footsteps paused, then entered the room. I stayed still, heart thumping. I listened carefully. Whoever it was, they moved across the room to the closet. I heard the door creak open, then the 2nd closet, then a pause. Drawers opened. I was confused. That wasn't normal. Liam never rummaged around. He usually scanned with the flashlight and gave up if he didn't find me in 30 seconds. Then I heard it. Liam's voice. "Ava!" he called in a sing-song voice somewhere upstairs. My heart dropped. That meant he wasn't in the room. Whoever was, wasn't him. Under the blanket I barely moved, but my mind screamed. I slowly lifted the edge of the quilt just a bit. The figure standing near the desk wasn't a boy. He was tall, much taller than Dean. Easily over 6 feet, wearing dark jeans and a light hoodie with the hood up. I couldn't see his face, just the shape of it as he froze. Liam called out again. Closer now. He was coming toward the room. The man, whoever he was, slid back into the corner, behind the stubby piece of wall that stuck out near the closet. Silent. Tense. Like a predator waiting. Liam stepped into the doorway with his flashlight. He was still playing the game, shining the beam lazily across the room. It skimmed the top of the beanbags. I didn't know if he saw me or not, but I decided I had to move. Fast. I sat up, feigning defeat. Okay, you got me, I said with a nervous laugh, throwing the blanket aside. Liam grinned. Took me long enough. I got up, walked over, and casually slung my arm over his shoulder. Let's get a snack or something, I said, guiding him out of the room with a fake chuckle. Once we hit the top of the stairs, I leaned close and whispered, "Someone's in there. We need to go outside. Now." Liam's face went pale. He didn't argue. We bolted, downstairs, through the kitchen, out the back door, and straight across the yard to the neighbor's house. I don't even remember knocking. Mrs. Halpern opened the door, took one look at our faces, and yanked us inside. We told her everything in a blur. She called 911 immediately. The police were there within 6 minutes. We watched from her living room window as they stormed into Liam's house, flashlights sweeping, voices raised. 5 minutes later, they led a man out in cuffs. He wasn't a neighbor, not a friend of the family. He'd been spotted walking the neighborhood 2 days earlier, asking people if they were selling scrap metal or tools. The cops found a screwdriver and box cutter in his hoodie pocket. He had no criminal record, but something about the way he moved, the way he searched the room, the way he stood so still, haunted me for years. Liam never wanted to play hide-and-seek again. I didn't either. His parents installed a new security system. Dean was grounded for the rest of the summer, which honestly felt like a small punishment compared to what could have happened. As for me, even now, all these years later, I still can't sleep in unfamiliar houses without checking every closet and corner first. I know how fast childhood can change, how fun turns to fear in a single breath. Sometimes I think about that man, how calm he seemed, like he was waiting, like he'd done it before. And I wonder what might have happened if Liam hadn't called my name. I never liked staying the night at other people's houses. My mom said I was just a homebody, but that wasn't it. It was the way unfamiliar walls seemed to breathe at night, how I couldn't quite trust the shadows, especially when I was supposed to be sleeping. But that night at age 13, I made an exception for my best friend Alex. It was a Friday in late October, and we'd made plans weeks in advance. His dad was finally letting him stay up late, and he promised we'd marathon Luigi's mansion and eat enough pizza rolls to make us sick. Alex lived on a quiet street in a rural town outside Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of place with a main road, one gas station, and streetlights that flickered more than they lit. His house sat at the very end of a cul-de-sac, flanked only by a second house, vacant for over a year, and across the road, an overgrown field that hadn't seen a mower in probably a decade. Behind his backyard was dense forest, dark and tangled even in daylight. We were in the den, the lower level of the house, just a short hallway from the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. Alex's dad, Mark, was asleep upstairs in the master bedroom. The den was our kingdom for the night, sleeping bags, snacks, GameCube, and a stack of horror movies we were absolutely not supposed to be watching. It had started drizzling around 9. By 10, the rain turned to a thin, persistent mist, and by 11 the sky was a shade of bruised purple, pierced every so often by silent flashes of lightning. That's when the first knock came. We were deep into a boss battle when it happened, 3 knocks, solid and deliberate, against the sliding glass door behind us. Alex paused the game. "You hear that?" he asked, his voice hushed. I nodded. "Yeah. Was that outside?" "Had to be." Neither of us moved right away. The blinds were drawn, so we couldn't see anything out there. My heart was already picking up speed. "I'm gonna look," Alex whispered, standing. "Dude, don't," I said, a little too loud. But he was already reaching for the cord. I shot up from the couch and flipped off the TV and the lamp. The den went black. Outside, even through the blinds, the night seemed slightly brighter than the interior. The occasional lightning illuminated the fog like camera flashes through smoke. Alex slowly tugged the blinds open. There was nothing but the sheen of wet grass and the reflection of our own fear in the glass. We didn't speak for several minutes. We just sat there in the dark, watching the door, as if waiting would make sense of it. Eventually, we turned the lights and the game back on, though I kept stealing glances at the window. We tried to convince ourselves it was nothing. Maybe the wind, a branch, a squirrel. Some part of me even hoped it was Mark playing a prank, though I knew he was the furthest thing from the playful type. It must have been close to midnight when it happened again. This time it wasn't subtle. Knock, knock, knock. We froze. 3 firm knocks, louder than before. This time they felt heavier, more intentional. We both looked toward the door. With the lights on inside, all we could see in the glass was our own reflection. Then lightning lit up the yard, and for the briefest second I saw the figure. A man, standing still, close to the glass, drenched, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie and heavy boots. His face, I couldn't see clearly, but I knew he was watching us. We bolted. Alex nearly tripped over the coffee table, and I was already halfway to the stairs. We ran straight to his dad's room, flung open the door, and practically dragged him out of bed. Mark wasn't the panicky type. Even groggy and disoriented, he grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat from under his bed. We followed him outside into the backyard, slipping our shoes on as we went. The porch light came on, revealing only swaying grass and puddles. But then Alex pointed. Footprints, he said. There were heavy boot prints in the mud, deep, fresh, leading up to the sliding door and then curving away. We followed them across the yard toward the tree line, but just before the edge of the woods they faded. The mud became harder to trace, and soon there was nothing. Nobody. No sound. Just mist and trees, and the distant rumble of thunder. We went back inside. Mark checked the house and locked everything again. He told us to stay in the den, probably just some local messing around, he muttered, but I could tell even he wasn't buying it. Alex and I laid out in our sleeping bags, wide-eyed. We left the TV off this time. The blinds were shut. I kept watching the clock. My body was frozen with anticipation, just waiting for the next knock. And when it came exactly at 12:15, this time, softer, but more deliberate. Like the person knew we were listening. Knock, knock, knock. We didn't hesitate. We were up the stairs before the sound had even fully faded. Mark was already awake, dressed this time. He told us to stay in the hallway and ran out into the yard alone. Minutes passed, then more. Finally, he came back in, soaked, shaking his head. Nobody, he said. I even went around front, the woods, field, nothing. He called the cops. They arrived 20 minutes later, cruisers splashing through the puddles at the end of the cul-de-sac. They searched the perimeter, took statements, and told us the same thing we already knew. There wasn't much they could do. No sign of forced entry, no known threats. Could have been a neighbor messing around, one officer said. Not funny, Mark snapped. My son's terrified. We stayed up all night. Mark slept in the recliner in the den with us, the bat across his lap. Nothing else happened. No more knocks. But I never went back to Alex's house. Not once. Years later, we still talked about that night sometimes. Alex would laugh it off. You remember that freaky rain night sleepover? But I could see in his eyes he hadn't really forgotten. It wasn't just the knocks. It was the timing, the certainty, the way the prints led nowhere, the way that man, if he was a man, stood still in that lightning flash like he was waiting for us to see him. And worst of all, that same week, after I told my mom I didn't want to go back to Alex's, I looked out my bedroom window late one night. We lived nearly 8 miles from Alex. I could swear I saw a figure across the street, standing between the trees, facing our house. Then another flash of lightning, and he was gone. I was 12 when I stayed over at Riley Martin's house for the first and last time. We weren't best friends exactly. We were what you'd call summer break friends. The kind that just kind of click when school's out and time stretches long enough to fill with bike rides, soda-fueled sleepovers, and dumb dares. We met at a community pool the year before, started talking over pool noodles and shared boredom, and ended up hanging out every few weekends until he moved away the following spring. Riley's family didn't go far, just a few hours south, from Lexington down to some rural town I'd never heard of called White Hollow. His mom said it was for quiet and space. but Riley told me it was mostly because his dad got laid off and couldn't afford the city anymore. Still, they had a house, and from what I could tell from pictures, it was way bigger than their old apartment. By July, I begged my mom to let me go see him. She said no 3 times before she gave in. We drove out early Friday morning, winding through roads that looked less like highways and more like afterthoughts. By the time we pulled into his gravel driveway, I was sweating through my shirt and clutching a bag of snacks I brought for the weekend. Riley was waiting on the porch in a beat-up hoodie, even though it was 86 degrees out. He waved at me like nothing had changed, but his eyes were a little sunken, like he hadn't slept great lately. "You made it," he said, giving me a side hug. "Told you it was the middle of nowhere." He wasn't kidding. The house sat on the edge of a wooded lot, no other buildings in sight. It was a 2-story fixer-upper, wood siding faded from gray to silver. The porch creaked under our feet like it hadn't been touched since the 70s. "Dude," I said, stepping back to take it in. "This place is huge." "Yeah, it looks cool, but it's weird at night," he said, lowering his voice. "I'll show you later." I laughed, thinking he was trying to freak me out. That was our thing. Light scares, horror movies, trying to one-up each other. At the time, I thought he was just setting the scene. I was wrong. We didn't do much that first day. I helped him set up the old Xbox in his room, and we played until dinner. His parents were quiet, polite. His dad, a thick-set man with hands like cinder blocks, barely spoke a word. His mom was softer, nervously upbeat. She kept asking if I needed anything. Socks, bug spray, an extra pillow. I said no every time, but she asked again anyway. That night we camped out in Riley's room with snacks and Netflix. Somewhere around 11, I paused the movie. "Hey," I said, "do you hear that?" He muted the TV. There it was. Thump, scrape, pause. It sounded like it came from below us. "You guys have a basement?" I asked, sitting up. Riley went stiff. He didn't answer right away. "There's like something down there," I said. "We don't have a basement," he muttered. "There's no access from inside." "Then what's under us?" "I don't know," he said. "We've been hearing stuff for a few days now. My dad says it's probably animals or plumbing. Doesn't sound like animals." He nodded once. "Yeah." He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the floor like he could see through it. The next morning we went outside after breakfast. It was warm, cloud cover rolling across the sky like it couldn't make up its mind. Riley led me behind the house where the grass gave way to thick, tangled woods. There was no real path, just patches of trampled brush. "We can explore a little," he said. "Not too far." "Why not?" He hesitated. "Just don't want to get lost." We didn't go far, maybe 200 yards in, when Riley's foot hit something with a metallic thunk. He stumbled and looked down. "What the hell?" he muttered, crouching. I followed and saw what he found. A rusted-over cellar door half buried under moss and leaves. Old iron hinges. No lock. "I didn't know this was here," he said, running his hand along the handle. "Dude," I said, backing up. "This is straight-up Blair Witch." He smirked, but he was pale. Still, he pulled the door open. It screamed like a wounded animal, the metal straining with every inch. Beneath it, a square shaft descended into total blackness. A narrow ladder ran down the side, half rotted. The smell hit us immediately. Earth, rot, and something chemical. Riley reached for his phone flashlight. The beam barely penetrated the darkness, but we saw enough. A dirt floor, broken glass glinting, something metallic leaning against the far wall. A cot, shelves, then clink. Something moved. We froze. Another sound, like metal dragging on concrete, closer this time. "Riley," I whispered, "we need to go." He nodded, eyes wide. Then we heard it, hands on the rungs. Someone was climbing. We sprinted. I don't remember half the run back, just branches whipping my arms and my lungs burning. Riley's dad was working in the garage when we got to him. He dropped what he was holding when he saw our faces. "There's someone down there," Riley shouted. "Under the yard." His dad followed us without a word. When he saw the door, he stopped short. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "I thought they sealed this up." He turned to us. "Inside. Now." We argued for maybe 10 seconds before he snapped at us with a voice that didn't allow negotiation. Riley's mom met us halfway through the house, alarmed. "What's going on?" she asked. "Call Frank and Leon," his dad told her. "Tell them I need 'em now." 30 minutes later, 2 men arrived. One older, one younger. They carried heavy-duty flashlights, tool belts, and something that looked like a crowbar. Riley and I were ordered to stay in the house while the 3 of them descended into the cellar. We waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. When they came back, none of them said a word. Riley's dad was pale, his jaw tight. Frank looked like he'd seen a ghost. The third guy wouldn't even come inside. They pulled Riley's mom into the kitchen and closed the door. I heard murmurs, then crying. An hour later, 2 cop cars pulled up. Riley and I were herded into his room, told not to come out. The last thing I saw before the door closed was a white sheet being pulled from a police cruiser. I didn't hear from Riley for years after that. He stopped responding to texts. They moved again. Vanished, really. It wasn't until I was 17 that he messaged me out of nowhere. "Riley, I wasn't supposed to tell you, but I think you should know." Me. "Know what?" Riley. "My dad found 3 full body bags down there." Me. "You're joking." Riley. "I wish. Old ones. Sealed. Whoever lived down there was hiding bodies. Beer bottles everywhere. Weed smell. Bloodstains. Cot in the corner." Me. "Was the guy down there still alive?" Riley. "They think so. Whoever was climbing up when we ran, and they weren't there when the adults went down." Me. "Holy sh..." Riley. "We weren't hearing pipes. We were hearing him. I don't think about it often, but sometimes, late at night, I remember the way the door screamed when it opened. I remember the sound of hands on the ladder, and I wonder what would have happened if we'd waited just 30 more seconds."